Hello and welcome to another episode of the Glamptuary podcast, where we talk about the experiential outdoor hospitality industry. I'm your host, Bobby Marston. I'm really excited for you to meet our guests on this episode, and their names are Mike and Ann Howard, or better known as HoneyTrek. Mike and Ann have been on a honeymoon for the last 11 years. Some say that's the world's longest honeymoon. During that time, they've traveled almost everywhere, seen almost everything. They've been to places like Asia, Africa, South America, Antarctica, and during their travels around the globe, they've developed a love for glamping. In this podcast episode, we'll talk about their passion for glamping, we'll talk about a few books that they've written and published about glamping, and they offer some great insights about where travel has been and where they see it going. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hey, Mike. Hey, Ann. Thanks so much for joining the Glamptuary podcast.
Good to be here.
Okay, first question. Where are you?
We are in Bucharest, Romania. Just got here in this beautiful little house. We've got 2 dogs. We're doing a 2-week house sit, catching up on some work, doing some glamping consulting.
Doing a big sort of journey around Eastern Europe for 3 months. And it's been go, go, go. I think we've been to 6 countries in the past 6 weeks. And now we're going to sit still for a moment in Romania and catch up and chat with you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Being true nomads, obviously this is kind of par for the course.
It is. Prague to here was like a 13-hour bus, and bouncing from Airbnb to Airbnb, but it's fun life.
How did you end up where you are now? Were you invited to stay, or was this a personal choice to say, you know what, of the million places that we've been, we haven't been here?
Well, as travelers, when we left on this journey in 2012, we quickly realized you cannot be planning every day of an indefinite trip. So generally we'll sort of have a sketch of the year. So say, for example, we knew we were going to speak at a travel conference in Greece in May. We also were invited to a birthday ski trip in Bulgaria in March. And we're not one to waste a good transatlantic flight. So we sort of cobbled these 2 disparate events together into a 3-month Eastern European trip to explore and to also get a little work done and just sort of get local for a while abroad.
Well, that sounds awesome. I think a lot of people, including myself, are jealous right off the bat. But obviously, you weren't born and woke up and then became travelers on day one. You're married, and congratulations on, I think it's almost 10 years.
Yeah.
12 years of marriage.
Coming up on 12 years of marriage, 11 years that we've been on the road full time. So kind of it was going to be a 1-year honeymoon that's now turned into 11 years so far without a house.
That's amazing. Well, what were your lives like before you met? Were you big travelers? Was this something that was just been happening and you just naturally parlayed it into the marriage? Or did this kind of come about after you guys got together and started wondering what could the future be like?
Well, we met in New York playing volleyball. And as New Yorkers who are just generally Americans with 2-week vacations, we're like, okay, how are we going to make the most of this little bit of time we have? So for our first trip abroad, our first Valentine's, having only dated 5 or 6 months, we're like, let's sneak into Cuba. And because this is days when it was Bush and, you had to inadvertently go through the Bahamas and get your visa, torn up before, returning to the States. So,
but it was still only a 2-week trip. We never did anything more.
An adventurous trip. And we're like, that was fun. And we kind of both had that love of adventure and flying by the seat of our pants. And that was sort of the first of many. Then the next trip we did, Belize and got our scuba certification, and then, took our first hitchhike and, started to kind of get this taste for adventure travel. My dad and mom lived in Tokyo for a number of years. My mom, with whatever money we had, we were going to definitely put it towards travel. And so it's in the genes in your family, big travelers as well.
Big travelers, but we never I think we were pretty normal in quotes. I think there's no real normal, but I think we were pretty standard travelers. Neither of us did a 3-month backpacking trip or had this dream of someday we're going to travel the world permanently. Everybody has that dream when they're 65, but usually it's okay, I'm going to work until I'm 65, then I'm going to travel the world. But we met a guy who had just got back from a 12-month trip with his girlfriend, and he told us how much it cost, and it was under $100 a day for the 2 of them, with their flights, hotels, food, scuba trips, all
16 countries.
16 countries, and under $100 a day all in. And I was and we had just had this realization that, wow, we are never going to see all the places we want to in the world, trying to do these 10-day trips, which are different anyway. Like, they're more curated and everything's planned down to the T, every museum, every cab ride, every hotel stay. So it's a different kind of travel. And when we had this epiphany that we were like, okay, we're about to get married for a honeymoon. Let's just quit our jobs, put our stuff in storage, which it's still in the same storage unit in New York City right now. We've been paying for it for 11 years.
Like shampoo and vitamins, like things that clearly we should have, done a bit more gutting.
But it's
beforehand.
because we went on this 1-year trip and we just fell even harder than we originally were, in love with travel, with telling stories, with meeting locals. And 1 year turned to 2, and then HoneyTrek started getting a little momentum. People were calling it the world's longest honeymoon. We figured, hey, that's not a bad niche. If you got to pick a niche, world's longest honeymoon. Then we started doing a lot of glamping, working with glamping properties and manufacturers. So then that started to pay the bills. And we just loved telling stories, and here we are still doing it.
I love that evolution. And you said something that's really interesting in that you planned a year. And was that plan based on, let's give this a shot and see how it goes because we have our jobs to return back to in our lives? What was the reasoning for the year?
Well, it just seemed unfathomable to go for longer. That was already wild and crazy, going from 2 weeks to a year. I mean, this is also 2011 when we were planning this, so there weren't a lot of role models for this kind of thing. Now we're like digital nomad is like everybody, everybody's doing it. And it's a common concept, but especially within the the North American world, we didn't have a lot of people to go, so how does that work? And how much does it cost? And what shoes do I pack? And we had so many questions and then, concerns as well. So we kind of treated it as this, like, maybe not get it out of our system, but like, go, we're celebrating this marriage and we'll like take off all the bucket list items. And then we actually really liked our jobs and our community and had a whole bunch of good things going for us. And like everyone else, then aren't you supposed to like have kids and settle down? I mean, that's very ingrained into you. And so there didn't seem to be another option. And then, and we were okay with that. This was going to be a grand adventure. But then even just like within like 3 months on the road, we're like, oh, no. If we can keep this going, let's keep this going. And, I was a writer anyway. I worked for magazines in New York. Mike actually ran a social network before that, Zuckerberg guy. Like, we had a background for this. We just didn't think about it that way. We just thought we had to go back to a desk. And we realized, wait a second, we have enough of a skills. And, if we bootstrap it and we learn to kind of live more simply and not like have to be chasing that New York dollar, like maybe this is happiness and success.
Where were you when this epiphany happened? And do you remember the moment and the conversation as to like, you know what, we need to take this risk. We need to take this step.
I wouldn't say that there was any like one moment like over dinner, like, hey, this is amazing. Like, let's never go home. And it's still like an evolving thing. Like, people always ask us, they always want to know like, wow, you've been on this trip now. It's like day 4,100 approximately today. And they're like, okay, when are you going to settle down? Like, you must be settling down sometime. Or are you going to stay out forever? And we're like, hey, it's always evolving. We're always just taking in. We're seeing like what we want as a couple, what's fun to do. We haven't had that itch yet to be like, okay, we found the perfect place. Like, we want to settle down and build a glamping camp, even though we get that question a lot. Like, oh, do you guys own a camp somewhere? Like, when are you going to build one? Because we want to come.
Almost bought a glamping camp, but
we did in Costa Rica, but that's a whole nother story. So there wasn't any one epiphany. It's just like, we just kind of, as we fell more in love with travel and storytelling, it became ever more obvious that like, wow, this is what we want to do. And let's just do it and do it for another couple months or do it for another year, see where we are at that time. And now it's just second nature to us. Like, when we sit still, even at this house sit, we'll be here for about 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, we'll be like, okay, let's get back on the road. Let's get on that bus to Montenegro. Let's go to Albania. Like, let's get out and meet people and we actually might do something with a glamping camp in Serbia. Like, let's do some, let's get back out there and tell stories and meet people. So it's just become like, not really, well, Anne doesn't like when I say an addiction, but like.
No, but it's like this ongoing education, right? So it's that we're constantly learning and that you're always in a new environment. So you're kind of always absorbing it on your toes and that is fulfilling. So the adventure, the education, the people you meet, our like global network of friends is like incredible, just because we've been out there and now we're kind of finding more, you know, nomads out there. We're not like alone doing this like we kind of were in early years. So there's a real community side of it that we enjoy, and the glamping community has been a wonderful piece of it as well. It's so we've kind of have our niches and our wonderful people within them. So
because like as much as we're like outside of the matrix, like the traditional work 9 to 5, save up, buy a ski house, have 2 kids, have a black lab, you know, get a car, Tesla in the driveway, like we're way outside of that matrix. And so is a lot of the glamping camp owners. Like they're chasing a dream. They maybe were lawyers or doctors or trash collectors, whatever their job was, but they've broken out of that and said, I'm going to start something. So we really resonate with that, and just like, and love meeting them and telling their story. And the whole Comfortably Wild, like that whole book is predicated on amazing camp owners. When you look at it, you say, wow, these look like amazing tents, camps, activities, but it's really the camp owners, which is how we chose every property in that book, because each one of them resonated with us and their guests in a certain way. And you know,
to further define that, because yes, it is Comfortably Wild, the best glamping destinations in North America, but it was never about, you know, the most glamorous and, you know, fabulous destinations in the sense of luxury. It was really about intention and people who were wanting to like share a piece of this world, like that they had created something so special and they were so stoked to do that, and they've just wanted to invite people in a way that felt inclusive and exciting. And we kind of honed in on people who were trying to like, this is going to be a fast way to make money, or this is, you know, the cool thing to do, or whatever reasons that people come up with, because a lot of people did see, you know, it became this trendy thing, but your heart had to be in the right place. So that kind of that's how we sort of made the list, is like, who was really genuine about the experiences they wanted to share, and we're doing something unique, not replicating what they saw on Instagram.
Yeah, it's something I've definitely noticed. And, you know, there's lots of different versions of travel. There's camping, you know, which oftentimes means pitching a tent next to a fire ring with beautiful scenery. And you can do the all-inclusive, which oftentimes means a hotel room, which I think maybe we can agree that hotel rooms generally look like other hotel rooms. Maybe switch out the sheets and the bedspread, but it's pretty common. But when glamping comes into play, each site and each glamping structure and each experience becomes very unique. And so even though it's under the same umbrella of glamping, it's really hard to specify like what exactly happened there and how does it relate to the next space, because oftentimes it doesn't. And I think that's what makes that version of traveling so cool. And for you guys, I mean, I have to imagine you've done every single kind of travel in the book, all I've mentioned plus some. What was it for you that made you fall in love with glamping as compared to every other type of travel that I'm sure you've done?
I think it's for me, I can speak to what resonates with me, is just the connection to nature, like how visceral it is, how in touch with the nature, the landscapes, the sounds, the wind, the smells. Like when you're saying about the hotel room that you swap out the different bedspread or maybe a different kind of flower or a different kind of fruit that's on the end of your, you know, table when you walk into the Hilton, like you don't get that connection to nature. Like it is a white box, and maybe it's got a different view, and there are obviously some cool luxury amenities, but when you're glamping, like you're connected with nature, not just in your tent, outside your tent, but you're there, you're right next to the activities you want to do, the hiking, the fishing, the river rafting, the mountain biking, whatever, you know, the wild foraging, like you're right there, you're in the activity. And there's something just, I don't know, really beautiful about being that close to nature, and that these camp owners, the proprietors, want to share something really cool with you. They're not setting up a glamping camp, some of them, you know, in like an urban setting, like 5 rows, you know, in the middle of a city block. Like then you would stay at the Holiday Inn or whatever. But they're in a beautiful setting that they love so much. They're like, I need to share this with other people. I'm going to put up some tents and show them why this farm is cool, or this mountain stream is cool, or this beach is cool, or whatever it is. They want to share the nature in it with a cool structure. So to me, that combination of cool structures out in nature is what became so addictive to me. And our first one was in 2012. And I think 2 months into our trip, we did a glamping camp down in Patagonia. But what's it for you? Do you have something different? Or
yeah, I mean, because we it wasn't as common a concept back then, and we were on this honeymoon. So we were trying some pretty fancy places, but we were also trying to stretch a backpacker budget. So we had the extremes of all types of accommodations, like, you know, from sleeping in hammocks in the Amazon jungle that we like, and building shelter from palm leaves with a machete, to backpacker joints, to mid-range, to some totally fabulous, you know, 5-star style hotels, because we were writing as we went to and did a lot of like more formal hotel reviews for honeymoons.com and a few other outlets. And then when we discovered glamping, we're like, this is it. This is totally it. Like, we are nature and adventure people, but we're on, you know, we still are on this honeymoon, and, you know, it's about connecting with one another and also going on some incredible hike, but then to be not being able to like actually relish in the beautiful place you are, not just be totally exhausted and have to reinvent the wheel on your shelter and your food and have a bad night's sleep. So it kind of, you got to savor the best parts of being in these wild places without all the like the schlep and the hardship of it. So it just sort of was like the best of everything to us, and that they were always boutique and had a, you know, usually a great story with it. And yeah, to wake up in the middle of, you know, Torres del Paine National Park in Chile and be like, oh, this is in front of us, but it wasn't like, you know, in a box hotel. Like, a box hotel in the middle of a national park just feels like they just shouldn't be together, right? Like, they should be organic and have a flow with the landscape, a mindfulness of where, you know, how you're treading on the land, interacting with the land.
That footprint is like also really important to us. We try to use HoneyTrek's voice to push sustainable travel, and glamping just epitomizes that, right? It's most of them are not even permanent structures. They're not, you know, or if it is, it's a very small footprint. It's off grid. It's composting. It's using solar and like reclaiming rainwater, and it's a very light structure that can be moved a lot of times. So there's just a lot of beautiful things that leave the land better, and the animals can habitate around it. It's not just a big, huge block of concrete, you know, being an eyesore also for other people who are hiking by or going through the forest. So, yeah.
So there's lots of different kinds of glamping structures. And knowing that you love glamping and kind of the accessibility it gives you to nature, but also the shelter that it gives you and a little bit more peace of mind on a comfort level, and also maybe shelter from some of the environment or the animals that are walking around. Do you have a favorite type of glamping structure that you stayed in? And if so, why?
I mean, I think they're all, I mean, obviously we do have some preferences, but it's very case by case, right? Like, you could
the setting plays so much into it. You know, you can put the prettiest tent, you know, and then if it's lined up against a bunch of other tents, you don't feel like you have that privacy. I feel like a lot of the luxury in glamping is that privacy and feeling like this slice of the forest is yours, and you can, that space is 5-star right there. But for a tangible example, I like to think of recent things. We were just in Slovenia, and it was this camp called Theodosius Glamping, Forest Glamping. They were it wasn't a big footprint, and they were kind of up a hill overlooking this vineyard, but then they were in the trees, and it was a mirrored cube. And so you're walking through the forest, and then this, like, the forest is reflecting it back at you, and it was like the trippiest thing. And then you kind of walked out onto your terrace, which looked over the vines, and then it was just kind of a simple classic design. They weren't trying to like over cutesify it or fancify it, but it was just like elegant and something totally different. Like, you would think a mirrored sounds maybe anti-nature, but it was like this infinite loop of nature with the mirrors. It was very cool.
That sounds awesome. I've seen pictures of some of those structures, and that's one of the cool things I think about glamping when it comes to structures is there really are no rules, and it's kind of being made up as we go along. There's some traditional ones you'd expect, like a yurt or a safari tent, but now you're starting to see tiny homes become a big deal in glamping. This cube, I don't even know what you'd call that.
But that's the thing. It's like, and we had a great, because for writing Comfortably Well, we were like, you know, we're all learning about this together. This is like an evolving thing. And, you know, we interviewed, you know, some major players in the industry like Ruben Martinez, and something not to misquote you, Ruben, but more or less like the idea is like, yeah, that glamping is different. Like, that's the whole idea. Is there isn't supposed to be rules. It's that if it's creative, it's in contact with nature, it's comfortable. So we kind of lay out those as well. Like, what is glamping? You know, just a few basic parameters, but creativity is the best part, is that it is totally open to the imagination, as long as you are hitting those parameters of like certain levels of comfort, you know, respect of nature. And so
we usually go with like a freestanding structure for just one couple or family. Like if it's a big 10 unit thing, that's a little bit harder to stretch into the glamping, but usually like you have your own structure. We don't care if it's a, you know, a mud, what's the ones they do, the Hogan, you know, it could be a Hogan, it could be a super, you know, your own like mirrored hotel or your mirrored glamping cabin in the woods. Like, yeah,
but it's that
range.
kind of autonomy and privacy that comes with it, and having the space. I mean, a lot of people who are attracted to glamping have come from urban areas, because like we covet that, just that open air, and that's becoming like more and more precious. And so, yeah, that autonomy and that connection and just fresh air and space.
Yeah, I agree. Fresh air, space. So switching gears a little bit, you started back in 2012, and obviously something happened called the pandemic. And I would imagine that had some kind of an impact on what you're doing, especially because travel more or less got shut down. How are you able to keep going? How did that impact you? How did you move through that and continue to keep your business up and running and also fuel your passion?
Yeah, we had quite the pandemic journey. And glamping became a saving grace of it. So long story short is that, you know, we didn't quite believe the pandemic is really happening come like end of February, early March. We were like, yeah, this thing is happening, but no one knew what a big deal it was going to be. So we, you know, we
got invited to speak at a travel conference in Europe. So we flew on March 4th from Austin, Texas to Germany to speak at a travel conference, which when we departed Texas, the conference was on. And when we landed in Berlin, the conference had been canceled that morning. So then we kind of pivoted. We picked up an RV. We did a partnership with an RV company and said, hey, why don't we take an RV? We'll go into Eastern Europe where the COVID is not so rampant, because mostly it was in Italy and Spain at the time. They said, sounds good, 10 days, just bring it back to us, make some fun content. So we drove into Poland, and 7 days after we had this RV, all the borders in Europe shut. And we got stuck in Poland for 2 entire months in this camper van, relying on the kindness of strangers, living in the woods.
There were no campgrounds open. It was snowing. It's freezing. Couldn't get a hotel room. Like nobody. We couldn't even like find basic things like water. Like everything had shut down.
But the Polish people couldn't have been nicer. They kind of took us in. Different farmers would invite us to park on their field and bring out pierogies for us and quince vodka.
It wasn't as semi-strategic. We're like, oh, this, because there's apps for everything. That's the world. That's the thing. The world is so interconnected anymore that, I mean, we lived and died by this app called Park for Night. And it was basically kind of would pinpoint people were friendly to, you know, hosting campers and whatnot. We're like, this vineyard, you know, let's see if they pick up their phone. It was this fabulous place, and he was like still somehow open. Like the first thing
he kind of opened for us.
Yeah, he did this whole tasting. We're like, are we even allowed to talk to you right now? This seems like out of, you know, magic. And then he's like, don't stay in your camper. It's freezing out. Like, no one's staying here for months. God knows. And he just like gave us this vineyard apartment, and we're cooking dinners together, and we're trying all the bottles with the bad labels, because he was like, I can't even smell it. And so it turned into this wonderful journey of like kindness to strangers, taking risks. Also, like we weren't going to cities, so we saw every possible like mountain, lake, back road, the depths of Poland 10 times over, because it's not that big a place, and we had time to kill.
So if anybody wants to read that blog, if you go to honeytrek.com and just type in Poland in the search box, you'll find this camper journey. You'll see the route. It's a bunch of squiggly lines. We drove something like 3,000 miles around Poland, and it's the size of New Mexico.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the pandemic. Then we got a call from Yala. You know Yala tents?
Luxury.
Yeah, they used to be called Luxatenton. And we had been chatting with them a little bit because they saw our book, and we met them at the glamping show in Denver. And they said, hey guys, like we're rebranding. We're going to relaunch. We need photos of our tents. We see what you guys are doing. We see all your followers. Like, can you come to the Netherlands and we'll give you a van. You can take whatever props you want. and drive around to all the camps in the Netherlands. Because once you're in the Netherlands, it was pretty open. It was pretty free to travel.
Correct this story just slightly, because
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell how about the whole 7 countries.
Well, that was the thing. It was really exciting, because this is what I think might be an example for other people too, who are especially in the tent manufacturer space.
Okay.
Is once you sell your tents, your structures, they're out there in the world and they're not yours anymore. So you can't really check up on them. Like, what did they do with this fabulous product you made? Like, how did they style it? Where did they place it? Like, what's the use case for it? And so they have
photos that we can use in marketing.
They can't, say, hey, guest, do you mind if I take photos of you? Like, it's kind of like once you sell it, it's gone. So they pinpointed some of their best tents around Europe, like Croatia, Spain, Austria. Like, it was going to be this whole big tour, and we were going to do this, because I have a background also in styling for magazines, and he's a photographer, and then, models for whatever we're worth. Do it all for them. Do a soup to nuts photography shoot and social media storytelling thing for them. So the pandemic's, they're like, can you guys? They're like, all the borders are closed, but they're like, we still want it to happen. If you can get to the Netherlands on Tuesday, we're still game. We're going to rejig this whole thing. We're going to do it all in the Netherlands. We had to sneak over 2 country borders to get there, pretend I was Dutch to even get on the train, and then ultimately did this fantastic thing to make their brand launch on time for to the Luxe tent to Yala.
Yeah.
And it was quite the experience. And then, not to keep going here, but that was such a wonderful lesson for glamping, is that in the Netherlands, the glamping camps were allowed to be open, but the hotels were not.
Sharing a buffet, an elevator, like everybody was in nature, freestanding units, so they let them operate.
If they had their own bathroom, they were like self-contained and responsible forms of recreation. So it was such a boon for glamping, because when everyone else was like bleeding money at the big chain hotels, glamping could continue because they were safer protocols and concepts of recreation.
Well, it's a great story and it's heartwarming for me to hear that everyone was so receptive and over there. And it's always great. You hear so many terrible stories. Obviously, a lot of terrible things happened in the pandemic, but it's very refreshing to hear the opposite side when people are just extending a helping hand. And it's great to see that you guys were able to pivot and you stayed true to your passion. This is what we want to do. There's a way to do it. We just have to think about it. And you mentioned the RV, and I think you have been living in an RV for quite some time. Have you clocked how many miles that you've put on total?
Yeah, we've put just over 100,000 miles on Buddy. And he's less of a house and more, his name is Buddy. He's more of like our adventure vehicle when we're in the States. So we're in Buddy maybe like a month or 2 at a time, then we'll go abroad for a project, maybe go to Ecuador, come back, be in him for a month or 2, go to Europe for a trade show. So he's kind of like our little home whenever we're in the States, and we'll swap out clothes. And but Buddy's been great. And we actually bought this camper, which is a 1985 Toyota Sunraider. So nobody needs to be too jealous that we're living in the lap of luxury, but he has a lot of fun. And we bought him to write Comfortably Wild because we didn't want to just like ask people, hey, can you send me some marketing photos and let's jump on a Zoom and tell me about your camp. We were like, oh no, we want to come meet you in person, interview you, stay there for 2 or 3 days, try your food, try your activities, and then hop in our camper, drive 600 miles to Oregon to the next camp, and then drive to British Columbia. So most of those miles were actually writing the book because we wanted to visit these camps in person. So that was like a wild 2 years, driving all around 9 countries. We visited, some by planes, but 3 of those, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. was all by camper van.
Yeah, so driving as far from like the Arctic Circle to the tip of Baja, Mexico, to Florida, and it's been about 100,000 miles, and yeah, it's sort of like mixing up our adventures. Like, we're just as happy to be, on our little camper as we are glamping, as we are in in a house sit. I think that variety is the spice of life adage is totally true. I mean, it's that, aren't people say, aren't you sick of traveling? And we're like, changes all the time. And we also, not just the place, but the style. So when we kind of go too hard into one thing, we say, let's like take a moment and go a little slower. Let's just, be in nature for a little bit and hang in some beautiful forest, or let's like have a little bit more structure and with 4 walls and a good Wi-Fi connection and a dog to throw a ball for. Like that's fun too, because it's always new when you're when you can.
And the other thing that like travel kind of teaches you is that you're not always in control, right? Like in your own life, when you know you've got your work schedule and you know what time you're picking up dinner or picking up the kids, or you know what time you're, you know, waking up, your alarm goes off, you go to the gym, like you're in control mostly of your schedule. Maybe your boss has a little opinion on it, but you've got your hours at work. But when you're traveling, like you're at other people's whims, right? The bus breaks down, or your hotel, your flight gets canceled, or you know, a big weather system comes and you can't make it to that island. Like, so you learn to be a little bit more flexible and malleable, and you learn to find the good in almost any situation, because one, you're just super pumped to be in the Galapagos or to be in France. And like you kind of, it humbles you a little bit in a good way. So I'd say like we've become more humble and more, and we can do this as long as we have, because we're able to kind of ebb and flow and like find the good, even in the crappiest situation. Like we'll laugh about something silly or find something beautiful in a place that other people might be like, wow, why would you ever come here as a tourist? But like you can find that little cute shop or the cute person there that you connect with. And that's enough to make a whole city worthwhile for us. So being humble and adaptable, I think, is a good skill that you don't have to have going into it, because some people say, well, I could never do it because I can't travel with my partner or whatever. You learn these things on the road, right? We didn't start off like we are now or as adaptable and malleable as we were. We went in with a pretty set idea, but then you just learn to kind of go with the flow of the river, and it's been pretty fun.
Yeah, and I think I would actually expand on that, at least in my opinion. And I don't think you're really ever in control. I think you can have an idea of where you want to go, what you want to be, what you want to have happen. But in any instance, whether you're at your job where you think it's all under the control, it's really not. And I think what we learned through the pandemic is we needed to be humbled a little bit. We needed to gut check ourselves. We needed to ask ourselves what's really important. Because I think a lot of people realize some of the things they thought were important actually weren't. Speaking of post-pandemic now, made it through, have you noticed changes in travel?
I would say an observation, because we've since, when was the end of the pandemic, it's all pretty amorphous, but say in the last year, we've been to Bhutan, India, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, now Germany, Slovakia. We've been a good amount of, and then also a lot of the U.S. And it's interesting that we went to, say, Dubrovnik, Croatia, and we're like, oh my goodness, this place is slammed. Like, I don't know what they were like pre-pandemic, but it seemed over the top crowded to me. And then say we went to a place called Český Krumlov, which was the past couple decades has been the second most popular destination to Prague for the Czech Republic. They are like, where is everybody? When are they going to come back? So I feel like people are playing it really safe with the destinations that they know are going to, like, they're just that, blue chip kind of destination, and everyone's returning to what is safe and secure and they've definitely heard about. But meanwhile, there's a lot of opportunity in these second tier areas, because they need the tourism because they are not coming back as quickly. And there's also so much joy in traveling where you aren't like tripping on a bunch of tourists. So I feel like be a little more creative in your travel choices, because everyone's following this same track because they just think it's safer or something. But meanwhile, there's just a lot more opportunity and need. Travel does employ a lot of people around the world, and that these areas are having trouble recovering, these second tier cities and destinations.
And then to answer your other question about the glamping industry and like what we've seen change in that since the pandemic, I think it's great. The upside is there's a lot more glamping properties from small to big. Like, it's way more popular because people didn't want to be sharing the buffet spoon and they wanted that reconnection with nature. Also, a lot of people moved home being maybe the childhood farm where they grew up, or out of the cities, and they went back and maybe they made a life choice and said, hey, okay, cool, that was a great 10 years in New York or 20 years in LA or Miami. Now I'm back home, maybe my parents are ailing, I've got this property, let me throw a few tents on there. And I see other people charging $300 a night for a tent in the woods. I could charge $200, put 10 tents up and make $2,000 a night. And I think it seems, and obviously like there's a big industry around it. So people want to be like, cool, like here's a blog, like how to build a glamping camp in a week, and you could be up. And I think a lot of people are in it without the hospitality understanding, without the understanding that you need to do something more than put up a prospector tent or an inflatable bubble under the stars. You need to do more than that to be successful, because just doing that, like you're not gonna have the guests, you're not gonna have the midweek booking. So I think there's a lot of people that maybe, I don't know, I'm not trying to like push our own like course, but like when we work with a lot of these camps and people who are in the ideation phase and saying, should I do this? We have some clients where we're like, no, you probably shouldn't. Like, let's talk the reality. Let's talk about the pain points that you don't see. When you just look on Airbnb and you see the booking night and you see beautiful photos and you're like, wow, they just sit home and all I have to do is clean a 10 by 10 tent and these people are coming in and they'll give me $500 a weekend. It looks easy, but there's a lot of pain. There's also a lot of joy that they don't know that is going to come from it, because it's not just monetary. As Ann said earlier, it's not just the money coming in and cool, I've got my mom's farm and I can put a few tents and like people will just come and leave. Like there's a lot of beauty of hosting these guests that they also don't know about. So there's a lot of pros and cons that people don't know. And sometimes if they know those things in advance, they can make a better product. They can be more informed. So I think that's one thing in the industry.
I think it's still, because as glamping becomes more and more saturated, people have the fun idea to put a tent out in the woods. It's got to be about creative experiences, unique experiences, ways for people to connect with nature, with the people they love, with this excitement of trying new things. It can't just be a different kind of VRBO or a different kind of vacation rental. It's got to have substance to it, because and glamping kind of became a meme of itself, like in earlier days of like, oh, what a funny word, you made up this word glamping, and it was kind of like mocked for a little bit. We're like, no, if you create meaningful experiences that connect people with nature and the people they care about, everyone will love this. This is not a trend. This is like what we crave as humans. So if we can offer something not just beautiful, but meaningful and memorable, like that will never die as a trend.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I also think it's fun, and I've done all kinds of different glamping, and I think it's fun to be able to go on top of a mountain and stay in a yurt and not see anybody or hear anything and just be at peace. And I also feel like it's great to have experiences tied to that property on a more expansive level, especially when you're talking about families, because kids, they need to be entertained in some way, and for the parents to enjoy their time, they want to make sure there's activities and things pretty easily accessible for the kids to do. If you're traveling into a new location, it's helpful to not have to do all the research about what are all the activities I'm going to have to book outside of where I'm staying. So properties that offer experiences on site, I think, definitely help in that respect. And for you guys, I mean, again, having done so much, what are some of your favorite experiences that you've done while you've been glamping, and why were they your favorite?
I use the example of Ranch Rock Creek comes to mind, because I feel like, and they're all very high end glamping, I'll admit that, but it wasn't about the fanciness. It was about the creativity of how they presented to sort of the day's adventurers, where it would be something as simple as like, if you're going to eat 3 meals a day, I mean, who's to say it has to be at a table? Like why don't we make take everything as an opportunity for adventure? And, breakfast today is, if you feel up to it, we're like, gonna snowshoe out to this remote area and do a bonfire and get the Dutch oven cookout going, or maybe we're horseback riding, we're taking out the carriages and we're, so it's just kind of like, it was an element of surprise. It wasn't like, meals are served in the dining room between 11 and 12. It was like, well, today's a new day and that means a new adventure. And it was like this element of surprise that made like what would just be eating barbecue something like unforgettable. So I think food is such a big part of travel a lot of times, and glamping, a lot of times these places don't have traditional kitchens, but hey, think unconventionally, and how can you use that to your advantage to be doing these like, totally out of the box picnics or cookouts and that kind of thing, where you don't need infrastructure. People have kitchens at home. They don't need, people have restaurants in their hometown. Like, what could you offer that's out of the norm? So you can play into that in a to your advantage.
Mm-hmm. One fun one, which is kind of an activity, but it's also just one of our favorite ways to go glamping, is when there's, like we call it glamping in motion, like you're glamping between destinations. There's a neat one up called Main Hudson Trail, where you take either a fat bike, cross-country skis, you can hike, you can canoe between some of their glamping locations. So I love that idea of kind of being in motion. Another one we did was called Teton.
Well, actually, I want to plan that too, because I just ran from Rancho Creek, which is like also like super 5-star. But then in Maine Huts, they made it feel luxurious, even though the actual accommodations were pretty basic. It was the idea that our luggage was one step ahead of us. So it wasn't like trekking with my bags. It was magically there, along with a hot meal, a craft beer that they had like made in their name with the local brewer, and homemade banana bread and that kind of thing. So like that was the luxury is always for me, the luxury is in the details and the thoughtfulness. So even though like that place was $70 a night and Rancho Creek was like $2,000, they both felt like I was well taken care of, and that is luxury.
I love the point you just made about it's not so much the price you're paying, but the experience that has been crafted for you. And then on the same side, from the business perspective, obviously people are always trying to figure out ways where they can increase revenue. What are some of the pieces of advice that you could offer to someone that's maybe started a glam site and they're trying to get to the next phase, to say, what could I bring into the fold that maybe would allow me to increase my booking price?
One thing that we recommend to clients especially when they're smaller, and we don't always recommend expanding your team because that comes with other headaches and salaries and health insurance and things. But one way to expand your revenue source without expanding your manpower and a lot of times not even the amount of effort you need to put into it is teaming up with local operators who can expand your offering, and you can almost fold that in as if it's something that you guys offer, like horseback rides or massages or in-room catered wine dinners, but you have a local hotel and you find out what they charge. Okay, is it going to be $100 for a dinner for two with a bottle of wine that you deliver? Cool, we'll charge $150. We take 50 off the top, a local restaurant that can provide that. Or the horseback rides, okay, cool. Is it 50 a person for a 2-hour ride? We charge 75. It's in the booking. And especially when it's during the booking thing and you can have it as an add-on in your booking system. And then okay, cool, somebody reserved a horseback ride for 6 p.m. on Tuesday sunset. It just gets forwarded right along, or maybe somebody on your team forwards it to them. And so there might be a little bit of coordination, but teaming up with local operators is not only a good way to get revenue, but it's also just a good way to get your name out there, because for every 5 people a week or 1 person a week you send to that horseback riding guy, he's got 100 guests a week who are saying, oh, like where should we stay? Do you know any cool place that's like kind of a unique like tree house, or that has like something in nature? And he's like, oh, funny enough, this couple sends me guests. So yeah, you should go check out XYZ glamping down the road. And then maybe they're not booking that trip, but next time they come back. So it's a great way to build future bookings, revenue, and also you can't say enough for goodwill in the community, because you're going to have a lot of guests coming through. You want everybody who's voting on the local town board or going to these meetings or meeting up at Cracker Barrel to discuss like the politics of town. You want to be on their good side, and sending business around is a really good way to get to be on the right side of the community holistically, and just when you need things done.
Yeah, because I feel like glamping usually are in remote areas, and sometimes your neighbors are going to think you're crazy because you're like, what's this thing going up down the road? Like, Gina, what is that? And you need to endear people to you and get them on board with your idea, and rally around each other. Because yeah, your community, if you are remote, like you might be each other's volunteer fire department. Like you need to be looking out for each other. And I think a good way to do that too is, incorporating maybe once a month, there is some kind of like, thing that's open to the public where you get a band and you buy s'mores or get a food truck or something that kind of invites people. Because that's also word of mouth. When their family and friends come to stay in town and they don't want them staying in their house, they stay at your place instead. And so it's making the circle of love go round. And I mean, one example of like being helpful to your community too. Like, funny enough, like we have a glamping consulting client, Mark from HoneyTrek Glamping, and the town is so stoked for him to open his place because they're remote and he's got a camp store, and they used to have to go like 30 minutes to get milk, and now they're going to go to Mark's store, and they're like in full support. So if you can think of ways that it can be wins for your neighbors, that's going to do not just business, but yeah, that holistic community.
And I'll give another tip directly with regards to revenue, which will sound counter to many people, but you should earn less revenue than you think your camp is worth in the beginning, because if you can charge a lower price point, you are going to get a lot more guests through the door. They're going to have a better time if they're spending $125 a night than if they're spending $250 a night.
And they start scrutinizing every little thing.
Every little thing. So they're going to leave better reviews. They're going to do a lot more value. They're going to feel more value. You're going to fill the midweek room nights. You're going to get reviews on Google, reviews on TripAdvisor, reviews on Airbnb, whatever booking platform you're using. Those reviews are what is going to propel your 2, 3, 4, 5-year business. So don't try and squeeze your people. And if you're saying, hey, like I'm only booked on Friday and Saturday nights and I get an occasional midweek booking, lower your midweek price by 50%. Fill those midweek rooms, because those people will eventually become weekend rooms. They'll tell their friends, make sure they're tagging on social, but get butts in seats, because not only is it more reviews, more social, but you're going to learn because every guest is there. Oh, what do you think? What could we do better? Tell me things. Every guest, and you'll just constantly iterate, much better than just having 50 guests one a weekend for the whole year. Get them in midweek, lower your price. So that might seem counter to people, like, oh, what's the most I can charge? Airbnb says I can charge this, but if you're not filling rooms, drop it down and get that cycle going and iterate and learn and get reviews and get social.
I think that advice is gold. It really is. But I think that's super helpful. And obviously, people can go to your website and I think, hopefully engage with you and get these consulting services, because there's a lot of people that have this idea of starting a glamping operation. And I think it's really important that they do it in the right way and then provide a good experience to their guests, because as you said earlier, people talk. And I think what everyone wants is just for the glamping industry as a whole to feel good, feel safe, because it is new. It's such in its infant stage right now that we have to be really careful with it.
One more thing on pricing, because it's funny because people, within our immediate friend circle, people ask us about glamping. Oh, but it's so expensive. And it's like some people who have really hit it out of the park, and some of like the more famous camps, their prices went up and up. And then people look to the most famous camps as an example, but it's kind of, hurting everybody else, because you need to, you have to still always be adding value. And then, people have a bad taste in their mouth about glamping because they shelled out all this money and it didn't deliver. So you have to deliver on what you're on the price. You can charge, an exorbitant amounts, but like value. It's not, you can't charge for novelty of glamping. You have to charge for quality service and a unique experience and price accordingly. Because people will be happy sometimes with simple things, but they don't want to feel like they paid for a lot and it was simple. Or, like manage expectations with your pricing and what you say you're going to deliver.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And again, I guess it goes into the strategy of where you are in your phase, what you're trying to accomplish there, being really smart about it. And Mike, you're right. I mean, getting feedback is crucial, because we can have this idea of what we think we're providing, but the truth will be in what is said back from the guest. And I think from there, then you start to make your pivots and just have that long-term plan in place, but know that you need to pivot whenever necessary to continue to keep growing. And whatever you end up growing into is what you end up growing into. And it just goes all the way back to what we said at the beginning. It's like you can have this plan, but you got to be able to roll with it. Well, guys, you've been everywhere around the world. Where haven't you been, and where would you be most excited to see that you haven't experienced yet?
Well, the world is a very large place, and we are still hungry for more of it. We've long been trying to get to Central Asia. So this one list forever. So like Georgia, Armenia, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan,
Pakistan.
We might have done Pakistan. That's a little farther over, but yeah, I mean, so Central Asia still intrigues us greatly. It's been fascinating to be in this far east in Eastern Europe too, because then like cultures really start to blend. Like we're in Bulgaria for the past 2 weeks, but really they were Ottoman for like 500 years. So like that is such an interesting mashup right there. And then, we were going over the border and like we were, they're in, everything's in Cyrillic. And then we come to Romania and I'm thinking like my head's so far in Eastern Europe. I'm like, it's like a Romance language. And like, it sounds like Italian. Like it's amazing. We're still always on our toes. That's the amazing thing. 11 years there, I'm still always on my toes traveling. But yes, so
I would say a fun one that we have been to that I would recommend everyone going to, but we haven't glamped there. It's the only continent that we've not glamped on is Antarctica. So we've been there. I mean, it's an amazing place. Everybody should visit it, especially if you love amazing nature and ice and animals and wildlife.
The utmost respect because it's a fragile place.
100%. But yeah, I hear there's a few companies that are working on little glamping experiences, like an overnight on the actual continent of Antarctica. So that would be pretty cool. That's pretty high on my list.
Oh, we also haven't been back to Africa in a long time, so we're really excited. We have a lot of fun things brewing for fall in Africa with a few glamping operators, because that's sort of like what glamping, the whole chapter of the history of glamping. So safari is not the history of glamping, but it did kind of take hold with the African safari in the public imagination. So and also that we love in the camps we're talking specifically, glamping does have a place in conservation, and it's really exciting when that happens. So we'll give them a shout out. Actually, Mantis, they, their founder's story is that like they had this land that historically had the big five on it, and it just became this like this farmland that was like devoid of nutrients. Obviously all the animals left, and he's like, there is a way. If they were here once, what could we do to bring it back to a place where it would be their natural habitat again? And, takes 20 years sometimes, but that's pretty impressive if you can come full circle. So I feel like, especially like we are, as glamping in the glamping industry and glamping owners, you're custodians of this land, and like what could you be doing to make it better? And, thinking about that from the actual like flora and fauna of the place, and also incorporating community. And so he's got a lot of like local training programs for hospitality, as well as, just conservation and awareness. And that's really neat. So we're trying to surface more destinations like that, because I think travel can be a force for good. And, that's where glamping can really shine in our eyes.
Yeah, I 100% agree that, and glamping can be this new lens that people start to view what they've seen probably many times over, but they're just now looking at it through a different lens, seeing it in a different way, seeing what the possibilities could be. And the beauty of what most glamp site owners offer is the chance to learn that culture, to really dive into it. Whereas, a lot of other vacation places are kind of a place to check out. I like to look at glamping as a place to check in for your mind, especially. So I really applaud what you guys are doing. And if everyone wants to follow you, they can do so on your blog and follow along in your travel adventures. So that's always exciting. I'll always be checking in and following those things. Where are you off to next?
We're going to do a little overland trip through Europe. We're speaking at a conference down in Greece. So we might do a little glamping consulting. Maybe Montenegro. I said Serbia before, but
we're so sad we can't make it to the Eco Resort Network, which is happening in Montenegro, and it is going to be undoubtedly a fantastic event. It's the same people that put on the glamping show and run the Glamping Business Americas and Glamping Business International. So no doubt it'll be fantastic. Wish we could be there. You guys should certainly check it out in mid to late May. Yeah.
And then for people, if you want to connect up with us, we're just at HoneyTrek, honey like HONEY, Trek TREK, like a long walk around the world. Just message us on any platform, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you want, or our website. If you want to pick up a copy of Comfortably Wild, that would mean the world to us. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Books A Million, wherever you get your books.
We can also do signed copies for your camp thing.
True.
For lovely guest reading in the rooms and decor.
If you do have a glamping camp, we'll send you a box of 20 of them. Just email us and we'll give you the wholesale hookup, and we'll sign them for you as well. Any camps that want to talk about consulting, just go to honeytrek.com/glamping, and you can see everything we offer for camps. We'd love to chat with you, or just have a little quick call and consultation on the phone. But yeah, we're just excited for where this industry is going. Honored to be a part of it. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the woods.
Yeah, well, I've read the book Comfortably Wild, and it's fantastic. So for people that haven't read it, they should definitely check it out. And next time I see you guys, I'm going to just have the book with me, and you're going to give me that autograph.
Sounds great.
Cheers, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode, and I hope you enjoyed hearing the conversation I had with Mike and Ann as much as I had having it. They're super busy traveling all over the world, as you heard. They're writing and publishing books, they're offering consulting services, and if you'd like to speak with them about any of those things, you can do so on their website, which is www.honeytrek.com. That is again www.honeytrek.com. And if you'd like to follow us, you can do so on our website, which is www.glamptuary.com. That is www.glamptuary.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you down the trail.